Hello everyone and welcome to my Soap Twist 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Deacon Sharp stood before her, his big shoulders filling the doorway and his eyes searching hers with a mix of hope and despair. He had approached her that evening with a ring in his pocket and a speech rehearsed 100 times in his head. He loved her, raw, unrefined, and fiercely devoted. He had changed for her, battled for her, and believed in a future in which they could put the upheaval of their past behind. But as Taylor's gaze softened to pity rather than passion, Deacon felt the ground shift beneath him. "Deacon," Taylor began, her voice firm but full of anguish, "I can't do this. I can't marry you." The word struck him like a physical blow, knocking the air from his lungs. He moved closer, his hand reaching for hers, but she backed away, the bracelet glinting in the faint light as if mocking his hopes. "Taylor, do not say that. We have been through too much. You know what we have. It's real." "It's not enough," she interjected, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I apologize, Deacon. I believed I could go on and love you in the way you deserved. But whenever I try, I see him. I can sense him. Ridge is my actual love. He's the one I've always belonged to." Deacon's jaw tightened, his hands curling into fists by his sides. He wanted to argue, to remind her of the nights they'd spent laughing over cheap wine, and the way she'd smiled at him after he'd rescued her from the wreckage of her grief. But the words would not come. All he could do was stare at her, the lady he had battled so hard to earn, and feel his heart slowly and agonizingly unravel. Taylor looked aside, unable to take the sorrow in his eyes. She proceeded up the large staircase, her heels softly clicking against the marble, each step an expression of her preference. Deacon did not follow. He remained fixed to the spot, the ring burning a hole in his pocket, until her footsteps faded into silence. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of misery for Deacon. He threw himself into his work at Il Giardino, yelling orders to the staff and cleaning counters until his hands bled, anything to get his mind off Taylor's rejection. But no amount of diversion could wash away the sight of her face, the way her lips quiver as she spoke Ridge's name. It was more than simply a rejection of him. It was a rejection of everything they'd constructed and dreamed about. His daughter, Hope, observed the difference in him. She'd swing by the diner after her shifts at Forrester Creations, her kind gaze probing his face for answers he wasn't ready to provide. "Dad, talk to me," she'd say, settling into a bar stool with a coffee in hand. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world." Deacon would force a smile, touch her hair like he used to do as a child, and deflect with a joke about irate customers or burnt risotto. But Hope was not fooled. She knew her father, how he loved with every fiber of his soul, and the devastation he was attempting to conceal. One night, after closure, Deacon sat alone at the bar, a glass of whiskey unfinished in front of him. The restaurant was quiet, with the only sound being the low hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. He took the ring from his pocket, a basic band with a single diamond, nothing extravagant, precisely what Taylor had previously stated she desired. He turned it over in his fingers, the light hitting the stone, and felt a rush of nausea. He'd saved for months to buy it, picturing the moment he'd slide it on her finger, the moment she'd say yes and truly mean it. Instead, she had picked Ridge. Again. Deacon's thoughts strayed back to the first time he saw Taylor. She had been a force of nature, a woman who saw through his flaws to the man he aspired to be. They'd connected over their common scars, and the realization that love wasn't always clean or easy. He believed in her and in them, even when the world, her children, her ex, her own doubts, tried to rip them apart. Ridge Forrester, on the other hand, cast a constant shadow. Taylor never gave up on him, no matter how many times Ridge crushed her heart. Deacon had been a fool to believe he could compete with a love that had lasted decades and was as much a part of Taylor as her own heartbeat. Across town, Taylor was dealing with her own problems. She'd returned to the Forrester home at Ridge's insistence, surrounded by the wealth and history of a life she'd never truly left behind. Ridge was attentive and charming, everything she'd hoped he could be. He'd sweep her into his arms and mumble vows of eternal love, and for a moment, she'd believe him. But then she'd notice the flicker of doubt in his eyes, the way he glanced at his phone when Brooke's name appeared on the screen, and the old scars would reopen. Taylor had quit her relationship with Deacon in order to recapture the life she believed she wanted, one she had battled for over years of heartbreak and betrayal. But as she lay awake in the bed she shared with Ridge, staring at the ceiling, she couldn't get rid of the guilt that was eating away at her. Deacon's face haunted her, the raw pain in his eyes as she whispered those fatal words, "Ridge is my true love." Had she meant it? Ridge was her soulmate, the father of her children, and the guy who defined her life like no one else could. Love, however, was more than just destiny or history. It was about making a decision, being there, and fighting for the person who fought for you. And Deacon battled for her in ways Ridge never did. Taylor shifted onto her side, holding the pillow, and let the tears fall. She had damaged and shattered Deacon, and for what? A man who couldn't seem to choose her without hesitation? A man who, right now, was probably messaging Brooke from the guest room down the hall? Deacon hadn't seen Taylor in months. He avoided Forrester activities, turned down Hope's invites to family dinners, and kept his head down. However, Los Angeles was a small town for people like them, and fate, or cruelty, had a habit of forcing encounters. It occurred at Steffi's birthday celebration, a sumptuous event held at the Forrester house that Hope had nearly dragged Deacon there. "You can't hide forever, Dad," she'd remarked, her tone stern yet sympathetic. "You're still a part of this family." Deacon had given in, donning an overly tight suit and stepping into the lion's den, his heart hammering. The estate was bustling with laughing and music, with Los Angeles's finest mixing under chandeliers costing more than his restaurant's annual revenue. He noticed Taylor almost immediately, standing near the bar in a navy gown that fitted her contours, her hair swept back in a way that made her appear majestic and untouchable. Ridge was at her side, his arms slung possessively around her waist, and his smile as bright as ever. Deacon's stomach turned. He turned to leave, but Hope grabbed his arm. "Stay," she whispered. "Just for a little while." He remained on the outside of the crowd, nursing a Pepsi to keep his hands busy. Taylor's eyes met his across the room, as if the universe had a twisted sense of humor. For a brief moment, time stood still. Her lips parted, her countenance softened with what appeared to be regret, and Deacon felt the old agony come back to life. She excused herself from Ridge and moved toward him, her movements hesitating. "Deacon," she whispered quietly, pausing a few steps away. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Yeah, well, Hope's persuasive," he muttered, his tone harder than he wanted. He motioned vaguely about the room. "A nice celebration." Taylor's smile wavered as she remarked, "You and Ridge seem happy." "We are trying. It's complicated, you know." Deacon nodded, his throat tightening. "Yeah, I know it's complicated." They stood silently, the weight of everything unsaid crushing down on them. Finally, Taylor said, barely above a whisper, "I apologize, Deacon. Regarding how I ended things. You didn't deserve that." He wanted to yell, to tell her she had ripped his heart out and left him bleeding. But gazing at her and seeing the anguish in her eyes, he couldn't. "You don't owe me an apology, Taylor," he told me. "You were honest. That's more than most people can manage." She stretched out, her fingers brushing across his arm, and he felt the spark of their connection as intense as ever. "You're a good man, Deacon," she stated. "You'll find someone who notices that. Someone who chooses you." He backed away, the anguish too intense. "Maybe," he replied, his voice breaking. "But it won't be you." He went away before she could reply, maneuvering through the crowd until he was outside, the cool night air soothing his burning eyes. He did not glance back. Taylor watched him leave, her heart heavy with the finality of it. She'd made her decision and lost something priceless in the process. Deacon was more than just a lover. He was a friend, a confidant, and a man who had seen her at her worst and yet loved her. And she'd given it up for love that felt more like a habit than a home. Rich discovered her later, his face wrinkled in anxiety. "Is everything okay, Doc?" he inquired, wrapping his arm around her. She mustered a grin and leaned against him.
Fine, she lied.
Taylor's mind was elsewhere, with the man who had walked out the door and taken a piece of her heart. Just thinking. She had picked Ridge, but for the first time, she worried if she had made the wrong choice. Deacon didn't return to the restaurant that night. He drove instead, the city lights blurring by as he meandered through the canyons, the radio turned off, the solitude overwhelming. He ended up at the beach, where he and Taylor used to wander barefoot and laugh about everything. He sat on the sand, the waves crashing in a beat that mirrored his chest pain. He considered throwing the ring, which was still in his pocket, into the ocean. But he did not. Instead, he gripped it tightly, allowing the edges to scrape into his hand, a reminder of the love he'd lost and the man he'd become as a result. Taylor had been his guiding light, his optimism, and the reason he believed in second chances. And now she was gone, back in the arms of the guy who'd always had her heart. Deacon didn't know how to move on, how to rebuild his life without her. But as the sun rose, coloring the sky pink and gold, he made a pledge to himself. He would make it through this. He'd love again. He would never allow anyone to make him feel inadequate. Taylor, meanwhile, stood on the Forrester Mansion's balcony, watching the same sunrise. Ridge was dozing inside, unaware to the storm erupting in her soul. She shed a tear as she remembered Deacon and the life they may have shared. "Sorry, Ridge is my true love," she'd stated, and she meant it. But love was more than just a declaration. It was a daily decision, and she wasn't sure she had the strength to keep selecting a man who couldn't choose her back. The bracelet on her wrist seemed heavier than ever, a reminder of a love that once defined her but no longer sustained her. She had no idea what would happen next, but for the first time in years, she felt the stirrings of something new, a hunger for a life in which she was not second best, where she wasn't content with scraps of someone else's adoration. Deacon and Taylor never talked again. Their paths separated, their stories running parallel but never crossing. Deacon found peace in his career, his daughter, and the quiet power he had always had within him. He never loved again, not in the same way he had loved Taylor, but he survived.
He laughed.
He healed. Taylor remained with Ridge, but the fissures in their foundation became bigger with each passing year. She never forgot Deacon and never stopped wondering what could have been. And in the quiet moments, when Ridge was far away and the mansion felt more like a prison than a home, she touched the bracelet and uttered a silent apology to the man she had shattered. Love is a brutal teacher, and both of them learned their lessons the hard way. Taylor discovered that fate is insufficient to sustain a heart. Deacon discovered that no matter how strong love is, it cannot always overcome choice. Finally, they were both left with echoes of a moment that altered everything. Taylor's stare into Deacon's eyes and the words, "Sorry, Ridge is my true love." She stood for a long time before speaking. The light from the window fell on her face, making her appear gentler than she felt. Deacon waited, mouth stiff, eyes heavy, heart trembling, unwilling to break, until she spoke the words aloud. The room smelled faintly of coffee and something floral, her perfume lingering in the air like a memory that would not leave him long after she was gone. His hands were in the pockets of his jacket, his fingers curled into fists he didn't want to make. He was attempting to remain cool. He tried to remain patient. He was attempting to be hopeful. However, hope had always been a perilous thing for him. She opened and closed her mouth before whispering, barely audible, "I'm sorry, Deacon." The apology was not new. He knew it was coming. But the way it sounded now, soft, regretful, and final, cut deeper than he anticipated. He swallowed, looked away, and then returned her gaze because he refused to be a coward in the most crucial time. "You're choosing him." It wasn't a question. He already knew the answer. She nodded slowly, palms rubbing together and fingers trembling. "I'm going to choose Ridge. He's my true love." The sentence sounded prepared but genuine. Just something she had told herself too many times, convincing herself as much as she was attempting to persuade him. He stood still. Perfectly still. As if motion could break him. "I thought," He attempted to maintain his voice. I thought we were building something real. We were, she replied quickly, taking a step closer before stopping herself midway. You were there for me when everything fell apart. You showed me kindness when I didn't know where to find it.
You saw me.
I'll never forget that. Never mind, Deacon. You mattered. The past tense choked him. But Ridge, she said, the name shaky in her throat. He's been in my life for so long. Decades. There's history, family, children, mistakes, forgiveness, and I'm not sure how to convey it. I'm not sure how to stop loving him. I have tried.
I've truly tried.
He wanted to detest Ridge. He wanted to shout that Ridge had injured her so many times. He wanted to know why devotion to the past was more important than happiness in the present. But the words never made it to his tongue, because he saw the truth in her eyes. She didn't choose Ridge because he was safe, known, or anticipated. She chose Ridge because certain loves, no matter how damaged or battered, are too firmly rooted to be eradicated. They become a component of the bones, blood, and breath. He breathed, shakily. I guess I was just temporary, he added. No, she said, shaking her head vigorously. You were real. You were important. You assisted me in healing parts of myself that I had previously believed were beyond repair. But the part of me that belongs to him never left, he said, closing his eyes. The agony penetrated deeply, but he contained it. He did not lash out. He did not collapse. He did not beg. He just stood there, the quiet thick enough to shatter the floor between them. I wanted to be enough for you, he said. You were enough, she said. Just not the one. Her honesty was equal parts kind and brutal. He wished she'd lied. She walked closer, carefully, as if to probe the air between them. When she stepped in front of him, she raised her hand and touched his cheek. It was soft, warm, and only temporary. He leant in nevertheless, since even if it was the final time, the memory would have to endure his entire life. Her eyes swelled with tears, but they did not fall. She'd always been too strong for it. He admired her strength. He despised it as well. Please don't hate me, she whispered. He exhaled a breath that sounded like both laughter and loss. I don't think I could, even if I tried. She smiled, heartbroken.
She dropped her hand.
He watched her walk away, each step slower than the last, as if she was dragging a rope between them that snapped only when the door shut behind her. That sound, the click of a door that stopped something that may have grown into something bigger, rang through him. He did not cry. Not yet. Instead, he stepped to the window and peered out, where the world remained inexplicably unchanged. Cars kept moving, people talked, and the sun shone, as if love hadn't just lost another war. He considered calling after her, telling her that she was making a mistake, telling her that Ridge would hurt her again, telling her he could love her more deeply, honestly, and devotedly. But he said none of it. He was no idiot. He understood that love was not negotiable. History cannot be outloved. You can outgive remembrance. You can avoid destiny. He was always a second choice in love. A stepping stone. Someone else needed to learn this lesson before returning to the love they couldn't leave behind. He sat down carefully, putting his head on his hands. The grief did not arrive in a flood. It came quietly, like a cloud that enveloped every thought, breath, and heartbeat. His chest ached, but not severely. Just a deep, everlasting agony that lingered. He thought about her grin. She giggled when she forgot to be careful. She leaned against him when she felt exhausted. She listened intently, rather than politely. He recalled the mornings they spent without speaking, just silence, coffee, and belonging. It had all been genuine. However, the truth does not promise eternal life. He had no idea how long he sat there. Time had no meaning when the future became smaller, narrower, and emptier. Eventually, his hands fell to his sides. His breathing evened out, yet it felt strange, as if he had no right to breathe so freely. He spoke into the quiet room. I hope he deserves you. There was no response. Days have gone. Then weeks. He didn't try to avoid areas where he may see her, but he also didn't look for them. He worked. He didn't sleep well. He listened to music that did not bring him comfort. He produced coffee that tasted harsh regardless of how much sugar he added. The world continued. He proceeded. But there was a void inside him, a hollowed-out space where something warm had once been. One afternoon, he spotted her again. She was with Ridge. They were laughing. She did not see him. He refused to look away. He studied her face, looking for signs of regret, confusion, or melancholy, as if she missed what they had together. However, she appeared to be at ease. People appear happy when they are exactly where they imagine they should be. He felt something within him break and settle at the same time. It was over. Not just in words, not at the instant she walked away, but today, in the evidence of her contentment. He exhaled a trembling breath, and for the first time, tears welled up, not out of longing, but from acceptance. He would not attempt to replace her. He would not strive to forget her either. Some loves do not vanish. They simply become memories that you grow to carry. He walked gently away, the sunshine falling on his shoulders like a frail promise. He planned to fall in love again someday. But tonight, and perhaps for many nights, he'd sit with the anguish. Not because he was broken, but love had been important, even if it ended up not being his.